Hello and welcome to Amplifying Athletes' Voices Off the Court. For decades, athletes have been using their platforms to talk about issues that are affecting this country, but it felt like 2020 was a huge year where a lot of athletes needed to step up and really use their platforms to not only talk about COVID and the pandemic that we're in, but also the killings of Black citizens in this country. Joining us, we have WNBA legend, superstar, extraordinaire, Candace Parker. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And then we have the SVP of NBA Digital Content Operations and Diversified Sports Content. Did I get that right, Eric Jackson?
Right. It's a mouthful.
It is, but you deserve all the titles.
Well,
and also we have...
live up to it.
Oh, you will. You're great. And also we have Chris Weber joining us, our Turner Sports analyst. So thank you guys all for being here today. So I wanted to really start things off with unity being a big theme of last year and so many people coming together. And the WNBA has always been at the forefront of that, Candace, but how in the WNBA bubble were you guys able to come together, be on the same page for everything, and have such a united front when these big moments really shook the nation?
Well, I think a lot of it is preparation in the small moments when the cameras weren't there. Just having a foundation of what you stand for and what you believe. And I'll say this over and over and over again. We are a league of women, 80% women of color, different socioeconomic backgrounds, LGBTQ community. Like, we are the majority of the minority in this country. And so with that being said, I think the WNBA was built for moments like this and built for understanding and being in the community. And I don't think it just started this past year. And with that being said, I think it's a lot of talk, but putting action behind the talk. And within the WNBA, if you look just underneath everything and behind the scenes of everything, we've always been in the community. We've always stood up for what we believe in. And we feel like that's our duty because we represent those people and the places that we come from. But just to be a part of the bubble this past summer and to go there with a purpose. There were so many people when you tune in, and sometimes, you know, you're on calls and it's for other causes and you'll have 15 or 20 players. To look on a call or to look in a meeting and see the majority of the players showing up, to be on calls with family members of women that have been killed by police brutality. I mean, that leaves an impact. And so I think all of us just, when there were certain moments in the bubble, Jacob Blake, just standing together in unity and really showing that we're stronger when all of us stand here for a common cause. And, you know, that's what we've done and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Yeah, and speaking of Jacob Blake, Chris, you actually were on that night when the players said, we're not going to take this. We're going to make sure that changes are made in response to Jacob Blake's shooting. And your words were so powerful and I think helped open the eyes to a lot of people who didn't really understand what was going on in this country, or maybe just haven't felt the need to really lock into it. What was the response to people, or the response from people when you did share such intimate feelings about everything you were experiencing?
Well, first, I'd like to thank Turner and shout them out because in this, Candace was talking about how the WNBA and the women there are built for this, and they are. She's 100% right. And you have to have partners that's built for it as well. And so when Turner told me, or Warner told me, hey, we'd like to see if you'd have something to say tonight because we were supposed to do the game and didn't know it was coming up. And so we really didn't have any time to prepare, and it was just sincerity. And so I was happy that the response from the people was one of thank you for speaking up for us. Thank you for saying what we've been wanting to say. And, just thank you for voicing, our opinions. And so for me, thank you to Warner for allowing me to do that. But for me, it was good because it had just been bubbling over with not only the deaths of now, but, from Yusef Hawkins and when I was a teenager to, the many Black men and women that were killed by the hands of police officers in times when we didn't have video recording. So the response was overwhelmingly great, and I thank the fans and the people and the citizens for, for showing the love.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that was also how the media covered it. And Eric, you being head of content for so many different properties, how important was it for Black voices to be amplified during that time so that our stories could be told?
So first of all, Black voices have been far-reaching for a long time in this space. As athletes, you can go back to, Muhammad Ali and the Cleveland Summit with, that cast of very important athletes surrounding him and supporting him. Hank Aaron through the years, who recently passed away, Jackie Robinson, who's always been, at the forefront of social change and civil rights. And it's funny that you asked Chris about that, because I just texted him something right before we started this session, and the last conversation that I had with Chris was congratulating him right after that in the bubble. And, the one thing I wanted to say to Candace is, you ladies have been on the forefront of this type of engagement for a long time, and we're just now recognizing you as such. And the thing that you left out, you were also mothers in the bubble too, and you had to balance that. And the one moment that resonated most for me when you guys were in the bubble was you had an owner of one of the teams, the Atlanta Dream, who was also in a Senate race. And not only did you voice your disdain for that owner being part of the league, but you also did not want her in the Senate. And you campaigned, you holistically as athletes, campaigned for her opponent. And it worked. That's the amplification, and that's the power of your voice. And so, last May was a tipping point with George Floyd, but these voices, these players got to be on a platform where they weren't at the time, part of the restart and inside the bubble. So you saw Jaylen Brown drive from Boston and march here in Atlanta. And so, those were all proud moments. And I think that type of engagement just created sort of a contagious atmosphere where more and more joined in that otherwise probably would have stayed silent.
And just to piggyback on that, I am a Georgia resident. I vote in Georgia. I did not even know what the Senate race situation was at that point, because I think everyone was so mad about the president that they weren't looking at those other elections that are so important to us nationally. So how did you guys got those t-shirts so fast? I just want to say that, and I have one too. But how did those conversations come about? Because obviously she made her comments. Obviously they were disrespectful to the league and to the team in which that she owned specifically, or was a governor of specifically. How did you guys have those conversations to say, now, instead of us just being upset about it, let's do something about it? Well,
I first want to speak on the leadership within the NBA and the WNBA. And I say that we have a pretty solid, I would say, players union that actively participates in both the NBA and the WNBA. There's a number of times where we would hop on calls. We had a call earlier in the year in the bubble with Michelle Obama, where she was talking about voting. And it was right around that time where our leadership, Nneka Ogwumike, Sue Bird, Laysia Clarendon, those individuals really reached out and talked to us and listened to what we had to say. And then from that, there was action. I was on a call with Sue Bird, and I remember her speaking about the Facebook and how they had to drop the to make it more catchy. Yeah. And she's like, instead of saying vote for Warnock, let's drop the for and just vote Warnock. And so that's how the t-shirts came about. And because we were in the bubble, everybody was connected. I mean, you think about everybody living in one area, so it was almost like the perfect storm of being able to kind of surround that message and amplify it in a way where game after game we wore those t-shirts, and we were able to have meetings whenever to talk about different things that we were passionate about, different things we had to focus on. And so honestly, I commend our leadership and just the cohesion of the WNBPA as well as the NBPA. Yeah, I think you guys always do a good job of collaborating and really showing each other support and love. And Chris, what I also think is interesting is that what we've learned is that everybody has to have different roles within this fight, right? Like, some people are leaders, some people are just
carrying the torch. Some people are working behind the scenes. What have you really learned about NBA players that you've talked to, or even some of the retired guys, about what is your role in this fight?
Well, I think it's just really cool that the younger generation is embracing the role and the leadership of generations before them. You know, if there was no Billie Jean King, there could be no Candace, one of the baddest women to ever lace them up in basketball. If there was no Bill Russell, there couldn't be LeBron and all the great things LeBron has said off the court. So what I really like is sitting back and watching the younger generation take leadership. I mean, what they did in the bubble, what the WNBA women did with voting Warnock and saying, okay, you want to play these games and treat us this way, we'll show you that even though we may be employees of the organization, we'll show you maybe who has the power, and that's the power of the people. So right now, I think it really didn't show me anything, but what made me feel really good is that, you know, the hands of society, I feel, is in a good place, even though we have a lot of evil present, because there's athletes like those in the WNBA, because there's athletes in the NBA, because there's partners in corporations and things that want to see all of these things change. So I was just encouraged by the stand that the WNBA and the NBA players took more than anything. I was just inspired that, you know, all the lessons of the past just weren't wasted, that actually put a battery in and fueled these young people, and they're going to take it to another level. So what's going to happen when their children, what's going to happen when it's Candace's daughter's turn, you know, when she gets to sit back and see all the great things that's going on now. So I just think it's really cool and inspiring, and, you know, it's doing what it's supposed to do, and that's making serious change.
Yeah, and I think also what comes along with that is we have social media now. So content has changed in terms of how players are getting their messages across. Eric, what have you seen when it comes to players telling their own stories, and then how it's the responsibility of the media to amplify those stories?
Yeah, like Chris said, I think the beauty of what happened was the youthful exuberance around, I need to have my voice heard. There was participation beyond what we could have ever imagined. And everybody has a social platform these days. So not only can I be visible in linear media, but I can be visible in digital media and tell the story my authentic way. And the authenticity is what I think makes the difference, because it provides the connective tissue with society that this generation really needs. It's like, here's a guy that looks like me, or a lady that looks like me in my age demographic. It's not the old head like Eric Jackson telling me what I should do. It's people like my daughters who, through art and expression, you know, do their own thing on social media, and people resonate with that. And so, you know, for me, it's telling my generation to get on board, and that we are in good hands with the younger generation, you know, amplifying their voice. It's beautiful to watch and be part of. And, you know, if they ever need the wisdom of, you know, those elders, call upon them. And, you know, like Candace was saying, some of those elders reside in, you know, the players' associations on both the WNBA and the NBA. And, you know, they're helping lead those voices. I remember hearing that, you know, the players got on the phone with Barack Obama, 44, told him what he thought about it, you know. Shout out to the president.
As we talk about the younger generation, Candace, we've been on some calls together, and what's so prevalent is that they're growing up so differently than we are. They're growing up seeing that it's not men's athletes and women's athletes, it's athletes representing so many different sports. And how is it that you've seen your daughter be able to grow and develop, knowing that she's able to be president if she wants to be at this point, versus before, when I think we were growing up, there seemed to be those glass ceilings that existed?
Well, it's so important to see something, obviously, but it's so crucial to see someone. And I think those are the biggest things now with social media and the reach we have with the internet. And I know C-Web, he has a young daughter as well. The moment I shared with my daughter when Kamala took the oath and became vice president, I looked at her and I said, see, you can be president. And she looked at me and was like, I didn't ever think I couldn't. So I think it's that generation that they've seen so much that they don't set boundaries and limits to what they can do. And so it's with that hope. And I just feel like they're just that childlike innocence of before the world told you couldn't do something. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm seeing now is that why can't I do that? Why can't, and you're seeing that in our younger generation and their care for others. I say all the time, it means way more for Chris Webber to sit up here and speak about women's sports. Just as with allies in our white community, it means more for them to say Black Lives Matter. And we're seeing kids that are getting involved in things that have no impact on themselves just because they know it's right. And so I think this generation is no longer settling for this is just the way things have always been. They're saying that what is right, and we need to work towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Eric, your daughters are older, so how do they feel about what they're seeing now?
Yeah, I'm a girl dad, and so, seeing their engagement in their young 20s in the political election, and literally my daughter staying up till 2 a.m. trying to see the results of the presidential election was like, normally she's up at 2 a.m. watching YouTube or Netflix or something of that nature. And then rising up the next morning pretty early and saying, Biden won, Kamala won, it was amazing to me to see their engagement and really owning the responsibility of voting. And for the most part, we went as a family. And that was like, yes, this is what, when I watched my 90-year-old grandma, her first priority was who's going to take me to vote, and I was like, a little kid, and back in my day, you could actually go into the polling precinct with them and watch them do it. So it's always resonated with me and my family. But to see that passed on generationally was just, the coup de grace for me. So.
Yeah, and Chris, you have little ones right now, but what messages do you think you're going to be able to share with them about just using their own voices and how important they are and that they really do matter when it comes to making changes?
Yeah, well, I have a boy and a girl, twins, and hopefully for my son, a Black male, hopefully that for his dad, I don't have to be as fearful when he engages with the police later on in life. Hopefully for him, he doesn't have to be guilty until proven innocent. And for my daughter, I think it's great because as Candace said, I don't think she's going to grow up and even think about as a woman not being able to. She already knows she can beat up her brother and as fast as he is and as smart as he is. So she doesn't have any limits. And so I don't think she's going to grow up in that world. As Candace said, I think it's really changed. And it's, as Eric said, it's been happening generations before, but it just seemed like this last 10 years or so have been a watershed moment where our parents, the ones that have put in so much work, has allowed us to grow up and believe in the midst of the fight and with things happening such as President Obama and Kamala Harris and other things and smaller advancements. And knowing we're not totally there yet, but knowing, wait a minute, we can make some strides. I like the fact that our children can really hope and believe because and I never thought in my lifetime I'd see a Black president, and I have, and who knows all the potential that this next generation has. So I'm just more so excited that when I teach them just to be good human beings, to work hard, to give it their best, to love God, put them first, that really maybe there'll be a system that allows them to be good by just doing that. And so I just pray that, they'll be able to live in all the glory of these times and the sacrifices of the generations before them.
Yeah, and I do believe that that's what's coming next. And I think a big part of that is educating the older generations on that. Eric, you talking about bringing people along. You've always fought for diversity in the workplace, and even young in my career here, talking about the hiring pool that you choose from. How have you chosen to model how you build your teams, and how are you helping your colleagues see that we have to change the diversity in the workplace to then affect the change in the rest of the world too?
Yeah, Morgan, look, this is a passion point of mine, and you know it from the conversations you and I have had through the years. Coming into the workforce out of college, went to an HBCU, did not know what to expect coming out, and spending 20 plus years of my 30 plus year career as the only one in the room never felt good to me but it never felt uncomfortable. And I made a pact with myself years ago that I would change the narrative. And the way for me to change the narrative was to educate on the other side of it. Educate them about my culture, who I am, what I'm about, but also demonstrate the work ethic, the voice in the room that wasn't afraid to speak up, and be my own authentic self wherever I went. Because at the end of the day, when I walk into my house with my 2 daughters and my wife, that's all I can be, right? So I got to be that everywhere I am. And that example for me needed to be such that when the next guy was under consideration or the next young lady that looked like me was in consideration, it was a no-brainer. And so in doing that, you've got to have that voice and be able to speak up. So what happens when the room changes and now your career is starting to elevate and you're in some rooms where the decision makers are? Because that's the room we're talking about, where the decision is made on hiring, on content that replicates what society looks like. And that's the room you want to be in. And when you're in that room, make a difference. And that's what I've always tried to do. And so a passion point for me has always been to cultivate those, that are coming up and be able to impart whatever wisdom I could on them and pay it forward that way.
Yeah, and Candace, we're talking about you who is an owner or a part owner, and just seeing how it's so important for you to have decision-making capability, not just capabilities, responsibilities, right? What was it about ownership that was so important to you?
Well, first, with women's sports, I tell everybody, you guys should watch women's sports. You guys should support women's sports. But I also have to put my money where my mouth is, because I have to make sure that I'm supporting women's sports and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And maybe it's not even directly benefiting me. It's not basketball. And so when the Angel City FC came about, I looked at it as an opportunity to kind of go into this business venture with my daughter, because I think it accomplishes 2 things. It's championing women's sports, but also teaching generational knowledge and wealth, and teaching how everything works in the world with ownership. And, so I think that was a huge opportunity for me, something I'm passionate about. And I love what Angel FC is about. It's about the community. It's about growing women's sports. It's about not just professionally, but seeing women in leadership positions, as you talked about. It's important to see a diverse group around the table. And so when that opportunity came about, I really am looking forward to going on this journey with my daughter. She's on the investor calls with me and asking questions. And I think that just is so important to be able to share that with your kids. And so that's something we're really excited about.
But it is so wonderful that athletes have been leaders through these difficult times. And I think we've just seen the importance of people with voices using their voices. So with that, I really want to thank everyone for joining us. I think we got some amazing insight. I really thank you guys for your honesty and openness in this conversation. So thank you guys for joining us for Amplifying Athlete Voices Off the Court, and enjoy the rest of your panels for South by Southwest.
Thank you.